Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guest today is Chad Barraford, a Rune THORChain core developer. Hello, Chad. How you doing?
How you doing? It's good to be here.
It's good to have an actual Chad on the show, right? So, and like as someone as the owner of the name Chad, you must be delighted that Chad has become sort of synonymous with stallion, right? So,
I guess.
Someone with Chad, it's like awesome, right? So,
I've always thought the name was a terrible name, to be honest with you. But
not in 2024. It's not. It's a great name.
Yeah, I guess it all shifted in like 2020, I guess, or whatever year that Chad thing first started being a thing.
There's the meme of that guy that like with his head turned like this and like
very with the beard and like the crazy hair and the bad and graphics.
Yeah. No,
I remember the first time I saw like a meme with the Chad thing. It was within THORChain. Like, it was a statement about THORChain, and I actually thought it was about me. I thought that guy was like supposed to be me because I didn't know that like Chad was like a thing at that time. Like it's like, oh, that doesn't look like me at all. Like what are they saying? Like, I was very confused by it, and then I had to eventually stop being an idiot and realize that it's
not
just a
you.
coincidence.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's just a coincidence of the name.
Okay. So we're here to talk about a couple things today. We're here to talk about THORChain, obviously. But what sort of brought me to your doorstep was the new lending. I guess it's called Borrow, not lend, right? It's called Borrow. So,
Sure.
Yeah, the new borrowing product that THORChain has put out. So this is a tweet that I put out maybe a week ago when I first got in my head what I was seeing. This THORChain lending with native Bitcoin collateral might be a very big deal. It unlocks DeFi for native Bitcoin. So never sell your Bitcoin, just borrow against it. There are no liquidations. So that means there's no cascading liquidations. So the whole shitstorm begets shitstorm thing never starts rolling, right? And that's happened in other systems, happened famously with Terra Luna. I've seen it almost kill MIM a couple times. So we've seen this sort of cascading liquidation thing just really get out of hand, right? So in your system, it can't happen because there aren't any liquidations. There's also no stored collateral, right? So we've seen all the bridge hacks. We've seen, people get into vaults. Basically, if you've got a bridge or you got a vault somewhere, odds are pretty good somebody is going to eventually get into it. So there is no stored collateral, if I understand your system correctly. So there's nothing to steal. It just doesn't ever exist. Well, we'll get into that in a second. You can correct me later, but that was what I thought I saw. Okay. But there's infinite time to repay. That much I'm sure of. So, there's no time limit. There's no interest.
Correct.
So, and I think the big danger is if the system is forced into a Rune mint fest to cover mass collateral redemptions. That said, from what I've read, you seem to have mitigated and boxed that risk pretty nicely. We'll get into more of that later. And I know Eric Voorhees is a big fan of this thing, right? And he's a pretty conservative guy and an extremely smart guy. So, that was also something that made me sort of be like, okay, this is like a lot more legit probably than I was at first thinking. But let's sort of roll back for a second and talk about just THORChain itself. As we were discussing earlier, THORChain, it is a chain, but it's really a cross-chain DEX, right? And so tell us a little bit about how that works and how you accomplish the magic of the cross-chain DEX. And there's no wrap tokens. There's no... there's no smart contracts where the tokens could get stolen, like what happened with Phantom, right? Their bridge got hacked or multi-chain's bridge got hacked. Yeah. So anyway, I'll hand it over to you. Tell us a little bit about how THORChain works.
Yeah, well, the bridge hacking thing is like the reason why that's a thing, like bridge hacking in general, is because the way bridges are designed is they both take on the CeFi risk of like individuals having access to private keys, which is totally a thing in bridges. And then on top of that, you also have the risk of like DeFi, of like, smart contract risk or code risk. And then you just like basically concatenate these two risks together to create this like ultra high risky system, which is why you see all these like hacks happen. Sometimes it's like a CeFi hack, like some guy got an email with a PDF was like a job opportunity, but there was like malicious code in that PDF and like took out a bunch of private keys. And there's been other ones with just like some sort of code risk. And so you put those things together, they become kind of ultra kind of risky. THORChain is not that thing. It doesn't do wrapped assets. It doesn't have trusted people who have private keys and like the sense of like what I'm talking about with bridges. Instead, the private keys are actually managed by a whole host of people, 104 different validators in the world who each have one small piece of the key in a matter of speaking. And they all, secure through their own kind of infrastructure across many different countries around the world. But just to kind of satisfy that particular thing of like the whole bridge concept. But as you said, THORChain is its own blockchain. It is a Cosmos SDK based blockchain. That's what we call the state chain. And so what happens is each individual validator, which is over 100 of those, each individual validator runs a full node of Bitcoin, a full node of Ethereum, a full node of Doge and BNB and Cosmos Hub and AVAX and these, a bunch of different blockchains. And they all just observe transactions that are going to and from the wallets that the network holds, right? BC1 addresses, OX addresses, BNB addresses, Cosmos addresses, whatever. And they all just make observations of like, oh, I saw one Bitcoin come in to one of our wallets. And they just kind of like vote on that and the existence of that transaction within the state chain. And they say, oh, I saw this. And then once a 2/3 majority, all the validators say, we all saw this, one Bitcoin come in, it had a memo in it, or what's called an op return in Bitcoin speak. And in that memo, it said, I want to get Ethereum. I want to get sent to this OX address. I want to get 5 Ether on the other side, or whatever the quantity will be, or whatever. This is the specifications of like the intent of the transaction. What do I want to happen with this Bitcoin that I'm sending in? And then once 2/3 majority kind of get that kind of consensus, then the business logic executes of like the actual swap with the AMM, and it goes from Bitcoin to Rune to Ether on the other side. And then
let me stop you there, because that's a really important point, right? Now, it took me a while to kind of get that one in my head. So it is a cross-chain DEX. There's no bridges. You're actually trading one coin for another, a native asset to native assets on a different chain. All of your validators basically run nodes for all chains, so that's sort of how the magic is happening. But there's an intermediate step where if I want to go from Bitcoin to Ethereum, I send my Bitcoin in. It then is swapped for Thor on the THORChain, or sorry, Rune on the THORChain. And so it's swapped for Rune. Rune is like the lingua franca. Everything is always translated into Rune. And then from Rune, it goes to the Ethereum chain, where native Ethereum is then swapped for Rune. Right. So your liquidity pools straddle two chains. And they're always Rune ETH, Rune Bitcoin, Rune, well, not Solana yet, but hopefully in the future, right? But
I'm working on.
So there is never a Bitcoin Ethereum liquidity pool on the THORChain. It just doesn't exist. It can't exist. It's not the way it's constructed. Right.
And there's a couple of really important reasons of why that is. One is if you allow for Bitcoin ETH and Bitcoin Doge and Bitcoin whatever it is, you just fragment your liquidity across many pools, which means you have worse price execution in those trades and those executions. That's the first reason. You want much more consolidation of liquidity to be like all stored in one pool, so it's not split up across 5 different or 6 different or 100 different locations. That just is bad for trading. The other reason why it's really important is that we want to make sure that the bond that the validators are running, which is they're bonding with the Rune asset, we want to make sure that the value of that bond is worth more than the Bitcoin, the ETH, the Doge, the Bitcoin Cash, whatever the other assets are, to ensure that like validators can't just like some guy just decides to run 2/3 of the validators himself, and he just pretends to be 70 or 60, whatever the hell the number would be, different validators, and then just steal the Bitcoin or steal the ETH and steal the BNB. Because if they were to do that, the value of the Rune they're locked up to get to that point would be worth more than the Bitcoin and the other exonerous capital assets that exist in the protocol. If you did that if you use like Bitcoin was like the base asset, you could technically do it, although it would be problematic, but like you could technically do it, but then you would lose what we call economic security, meaning that somebody could just like walk up with a bunch of money and then take over the network and then steal all of the money for everybody, including the validators. And then, then it's very highly, it would be highly profitable. Yes.
Yeah, highly unprofitable. So you'd lose money. You could win, but you'd lose money. It would take you more money to steal it than you'd get.
Right. That's one of the kind of core concepts of THORChain's design, is to ensure that even if you had the money and you had the intention to do something, you still wouldn't do it, because it would just be economically, dumb. Unless you're like some sort of like political leader of a terrible country. I'm not going to name anyone because I don't want to piss anybody off. But like,
unless you're like the Joker or the Riddler and like chaos.
If you're the Joker, you're Heath Ledger, you know what I mean, or whatever it is, and you want to see the whole world burn, quote unquote. then maybe that would make sense. But that's not how we design economic incentives in crypto, right? Like crypto in general is all based upon economic incentives to achieve everything, right?
So,
Bitcoin was obviously first, and these economic incentives for everything to operate in the correct way that it wants to operate, and incentivizing everybody to behave in a specific way to create the outcome we're looking to get. And so THORChain is no different than that in that regard.
Yeah. Super cool. So it's a very, very clever design. And the other sort of interesting thing about that is because all of the liquidity pairs are always paired with Rune, as the usage of this cross-chain DEX grows, the demand for Rune grows, right? Because the liquidity pools will grow in size, which means we always have to, the liquidity providers have to always buy half Rune for whatever, whatever the other coin is they're putting into the pool. So if these pools get very big, then that ostensibly means that a lot of Rune there's a lot of demand for Rune, right? To participate in these pools. So super cool.
Right. That's one of the core concepts is about token economics, and having a DEX where its primary asset, in our case, it's called Rune, where no matter what you do on the protocol, whether you're swapping, whether you're running a node, whether you're being an LP, whether you're being a saver, whether you're doing a loan, like whatever, any action you take on the protocol will inherently drive some amount of value or into the network, and therefore into the Rune token, like inherently so. That's partially why we just recently saw this huge run up in Rune's price, right? In part, that's because that we just saw a 4 to 6x in volume trading, and that creates a lot of demand for Rune. Like, it's not the sole reason why it went up as much as it went, but it is certainly a contributing factor.
Very interesting. So, yeah, I was wondering, I knew it was definitely connected somehow, I think, to the Borrow product, which we're going to talk about next here.
Yep.
So basically the Borrow product drove liquidity of Rune in the system on the cross-chain DEX, just because there was a lot more usage. I was trying to calculate. I know there's like 500 million Rune is the total, I believe is the total.
Total supply cap.
Total supply cap. Thank you. Brains off. So supply cap's 500 million. But you only have about 6 million, I think, when I last checked, that's been burned. Actually, let's talk about how it works. But it's only 6 million has been burned. 6 million Rune has been burned to power the Borrow program, which didn't feel like enough to sort of drive the price, right? That felt like too little. So
there's a difference between, like, if I were to just remove half of the Rune supply right now, just magically, in theory, from a purely like paper perspective, the price should double, right? Because the market cap's the same, there's less tokens, cut in half, therefore the price should double. But that's not the only thing that drives the price. Obviously, there's the market pressure of acquiring that Rune. There's a difference between just burning and buying and burning. Those are two different ideas, right? And so burning itself doesn't actually drive as much value as people think it does. It's actually not as valuable as people talk about, like IP 1559 and how it's burned 0.03% of the ETH supply, blah, blah, blah. It's fucking nothing in terms of like the actual value that brings. The psychological element to it is significant. People, in our industry just go apeshit crazy about deflationary assets, and they just want to buy it. And that creates buy pressure, which causes the price to go up. And so in our particular case, it's much more interesting than that, in that when you open a loan, you're creating buy pressure of the Rune asset inherently, and you're creating burn pressure of the Rune asset inherently. You're having those two things to happen to start. But then you also said, hey, we just created a mechanism to burn, 20 or 25 million Rune, or whatever the number is. And that's effectively 200 million or 210 million, or whatever the hell the number, 220 million, whatever the hell the number is today, of market buy and burn pressure of the Rune asset, which just creates, from people's perspectives, like from an investment, from a speculative perspective, I want to buy this asset because there's going to be this huge buy and burn pressure on the asset, which is going to cause the number to go up, which by itself makes the number go up in a sense.
Right. Yeah, totally get that. All right. So let's go through the process. I've actually done it myself now a couple times. So I've sort of seen this in action. I use the Shapeshift wallet, the native wallet, and I've used a ledger. So I've sort of done it both ways. And those were very different experiences, actually, which I'll talk a little bit about. But let's just talk about the Borrow process in general. So first thing I do is I connect the Bitcoin wallet. I start the process, and basically I upload my Bitcoin into the system as collateral for my loan, and I can now borrow up to 50% of whatever the dollar value of that Bitcoin is at that moment. So if it's 70K, I can borrow, roughly 35K worth of something else. It could be USDC, it could be, it could be Bitcoin, or it could be Ethereum, anything your system sort of supports, right?
Yep.
So my understanding is that when I upload my collateral, it's immediately all converted to Rune. And that's the first step that happens, right? So
it sells the Bitcoin and it buys Rune is the first step. Yep.
Yes. Okay. And then what it does is it burns half the Rune, right? I think it just sort of makes it go away. Is that correct?
Yes. In a sense, it's actually it's burning the Rune and it's minting what we call a derived asset, which is basically like a Thor BDC. That's actually the collateral of your loan. Technically, it's not actually the Bitcoin that's your collateral. It's the derived asset that's technically the actual collateral. You just never acquire it. You never hold it in your wallet. You just you start with the Bitcoin, and then the network holds your derived asset for you on your behalf in the protocol itself. That's your collateral, right? And then because it's a 50% LTV or 200% CR, as we call it, those two things are the same. We mint, a bunch of THOR. THOR is like our kind of US denominated dollar-like system, blah, blah, blah. That becomes your debt is always in dollar terms or THOR terms, not in the Bitcoin that you receive or the Ether you receive or even the USDC you receive. It's always in just like the dollar terms according to how the THOR asset works. And so we just mint back half of it. So we burned $70,000 to use your numbers, and then we minted 35,000 back. So we have a net buy and burn of half of that. So 35,000 of like net buy and burn pressure on the Rune asset.
Right. But that Rune, that's gone. You have actually burned it. It doesn't exist anywhere. So you got this other sort of placeholder bookkeeping token, just so you know kind of what happened on your back end books. But that the Rune's off the market, doesn't even exist. It's not staked anywhere. And then you take the other half and you buy whatever the asset is that I want for my loan. So let's just say it's USDC. You go buy some USDC with that Rune, I believe. And then, in your system, using your own DEX, using the THORChain DEX, and boom, I get my USDC. Bye, I'm gone. Off I go. And so far, so good.
Hello? I think I lost you for a second there.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll edit that out. So
try again.
Yeah, so that Rune, it's gone. It doesn't exist anywhere at all. Oh, sorry, I take my USDC and I'm gone. All right, so bye, I'm off. Okay.
Yep.
So, and so let me ask you a question about that THOR token, because I have read about this. I didn't know what that was. And that is a dollar denominated token. So when I do a loan, where does that THOR go? Is that in a smart contract on your side? Does it exist somewhere?
No, it doesn't exist anywhere. So the market cap of THOR is always $0 at the end of every block. There is no supply of THOR at any given moment. At least in the current moment, that's true. Maybe THOR will become an asset that you can generally just buy and hold in a wallet at some point in the future. That's something for a future community to vote on, which is another topic of discussion. But that's only it's only really used, at least predominantly, for just the accounting of the debt, right? And so what actually happens is, say we're going to give you 35,000, THOR in this particular loan we're talking about. We just mint the THOR, and then we swap the THOR to Rune, and then the Rune to whatever asset you want to receive on the other side. Maybe it's USDC, maybe it's Bitcoin. I don't know. It doesn't matter to us, right? And so we mint the THOR, which causes a swap to Rune. You're paying swap fees along the way, of course. But that's how that Rune is basically minted, and then it buys the other asset, the ending asset that you want to receive on the other side, whatever that is. But that THOR is like minted, and then just instantly burned a split second later. Okay.
So now, how do you guys make money? Because you're not charging me interest, right? And I know there's the swap fees, with the process, so you're making some money that way. Is there some other way you're making money with Borrow here?
Yeah, I mean, swap fees is part of it. We did see a large volume and increase in trade volume on the network in the last week or so, which is obviously good. Actually, saw more than I would have guessed, to be honest with you, but it was great to see. But the primary kind of value gain that the protocol gets is not from charging you an interest rate or something like this, what you would normally see in a normal DeFi loan. It's just the idea that you're giving us some exogenous asset, like a Bitcoin, for example. You're selling that asset. You're creating downward pressure on the BDC asset, and then you're creating buy pressure and burn pressure on the Rune asset, which causes Rune price to to accrue some value, right? Because you're increasing the market cap of Rune inherently so when you open up a loan. And by doing that, you're causing the Rune price to go up, which also means the TVL increases, the security also increases, volume also increases. Like almost every kind of attribute of the protocol that we like call the main KPIs, every one of those KPIs goes in the same direction. They're all going up and to the right in a matter of speaking. So it's not so much we get like an interest from it. In fact, we don't even want you to close your loan. Like the longer your loan is open, the better it is for the protocol, which means the longer period of time that collateral that you put into the network is just driving value into the market cap of Rune, right? The market cap of the protocol, the value of the protocol. So if you just open a loan, does like never come back ever again in the rest of your life, fan-fucking-tastic, right? the protocol would be very excited in that hypothetical scenario. It's where you actually would benefit the most, right? So we love it. And that's why we don't charge you an interest rate. We don't want you to close your loan. It's actually not beneficial to the protocol to close your loan. It's actually beneficial to not close it. So we don't really want to create the incentives for you to like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and pay back my loan because the interest rate's at 18%, which I think was what MakerDAO is at right now.
Yeah, absolutely insane. So, okay. So before we move on to redemption, let's talk about sort of capacity right now. So the system at the moment is about 40% full, right? So you don't just allow infinite loan taking, you cage it into a specific range, at least for right now. And I think you'll always cage it in some way, but it might be bigger later. But right now, I think you have like 150 million or so available. And is that correct? Okay, that is right.
Yeah, it's probably like somewhere close to, I'm going to guess, without looking, 16 or 18 million Rune in worth of collateral in Rune terms. Yeah. So that's, 100 and something million dollars worth of collateral that's allowed to come into the network before the caps are hit.
Yes. So, and it's 40% full right now. And I've been watching it every day because I'm just sort of curious as to how it's doing. And like I said, I've used it myself at low power. I have yet to go in force into it. I'm a little scared. We'll get into my fears later. But
there was a guy that opened a $2 million loan the other day, which was pretty. Actually, I think we've actually had two of those. $2 million collateral being put into the protocol to get a $1 million debt.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, so one other thing we should mention about the borrow process is you're locked up for 30 days. So you can't just show back up and redeem your loan. 30-day wait before anyone can redeem. So therefore, since you just opened this, nobody can redeem right now. Is that right? Like, how is that?
If you've opened your loan within 30 days, then yes, you cannot redeem until 30 days is up.
Okay, because I thought I saw some loan redemption, so I was a little confused. Because I was like, nobody can be redeeming right now because nobody's been in the system for 30 days.
Lending has been out and available for, I don't know, I want to say 6 months, since August, I think, or something like this. So it's been out, but just in a small cap, like a very small kind of micro exposure to it. Do you see what I mean? So those loans are capable of closing their loans. Unless you reopen another loan on top of the loan you already have, then that 30 days is reset back to 30 days again and has to click down to zero. But there are loans that can close, but the majority of loans that are open today are probably not even closable.
So if I open up another loan, it just sort of concatenates the loans and restarts the clock, basically?
Effectively, yeah. If you put more Bitcoin in with the same Bitcoin wallet, then yes, it would just up your current loan, but it would also reset the clock for another 30 days.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right, so let's talk about redemption. Now, when I come back to redeem, I must do so. I can do so with any token. I don't actually have to show up with the token I borrowed. The US dollar amounts have to match what the initial US dollar was of the collateral at the time I put it into the vault, right? So, so that's how it works.
Right. So what you always owe is the Tor, right? What you owe is the Tor, not the Bitcoin or the ETH or whatever it is you received. So it doesn't matter which asset you start from. The network will just swap to Rune and then swap to Tor and then pay down your debt, whatever quantity that you are owed or whatever. So it doesn't matter which asset you're paying back for, and it doesn't even matter which address you're paying back from. I could pay back your loan if I really wanted to. I don't think I would, because why would I? I'm not that nice of a man. But anybody could pay down anybody's debt if they really were so inclined.
Huh. And I assume they wouldn't get my collateral if they paid down my debt, because that would
no. The collateral always goes back to the same address that received it. Yeah. So if you send them Bitcoin,
I just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. I can't steal your collateral.
That's actually a good deal.
No, I can't steal your collateral, but I can pay down your debt for you. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Good to know. Okay. So, but I owe the system $35K in my example, right? So I got to show back up with $35K of something. So let's just say I show up with $35K worth of USDC.
Yep.
So I put the $35K in. Now the system mints as much Rune as it needs. Yeah, so basically I give it $35K of USDC. It mints $35K worth of Rune at the price at that moment. And then it uses that to go buy the asset that I originally gave you, as much Rune as it needs, right? So maybe Bitcoin is $1 million at this point. So even though I pay in $35K, it owes me a full Bitcoin, which is now $1 million. So it's got to print as much Rune as it needs, and then go buy a Bitcoin in your system to give back to me. That's correct.
Right. So there's a couple of caveats to hit.
Go ahead.
When you're opening a loan, you are burning the collateral and then you're minting the debt, right? And when you're closing loans, the inverse, you are burning the debt and then minting the collateral. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So if the debt is 35 and the collateral is worth, 100,000, whatever, $1 million, doesn't really matter. You're going to burn 35,000 first, and then you're going to mint that, million, or how the number is. So, but part of the thesis of this design is that in bull markets, when Bitcoin hits $1 million or whatever it is, that the strong tendency is that Bitcoin is almost always the least performing asset in crypto. And it's not because Bitcoin sucks or something like this. That's not what I mean at all. What I mean is just that in bull markets, larger market cap assets will move less than smaller market cap assets, right? And I just saw Raul Pal just talking about this the other day of likely in the bull market, ETH will outperform Bitcoin. Not because ETH is better than Bitcoin or Sol is better than Bitcoin or whatever. It's just because it takes less economic pressure to move Ethereum's price up 10% than it does Bitcoin. So in a scenario where you have a bull market and all the alts kind of go to the moon, whenever, and Bitcoin's 3x higher than its all-time lows, or not all-time lows, but its lows from the last bear market, alts generally speaking are strongly, and you can look at almost every alt, at least the vast majority of them. This is almost always true. And so if Bitcoin's at $1 million, more than likely ETH and Rune and Sol and every other random token you can think of is probably pretty far up there as well.
A lot higher.
Right. Yeah. And so in a bull market, alts will outperform Bitcoin. And in a bear market, Bitcoin will outperform alts, conversely.
Yes. Okay. So basically we're sort of betting that Bitcoin will perform the least well out of everything, because historically that's been true, and it's in terms of multiple.
Yeah, it's always been true in almost every cycle
value.
since there's been alts.
Raw dollar values is the multiples the same thing. You'll make more money.
There's like master coin,
Solana
kind of thing,
or Ethereum.
But yes, Ethereum didn't come out until like 6 years ago, I think it was, or 7 years ago, whatever it was, and so yeah, in the time that we've seen alts, it consistently alts outperform Bitcoin in bull markets.
Yeah, and I have seen the Raw Paul says that Ethereum will outperform Bitcoin, and then Solana will outperform Ethereum. That's his sort of core thesis, which I believe he's still holding on to.
Right, and again, he's saying that not because he thinks the coins necessarily are better. He's just saying that's just outcome.
Just what happens.
This is true. This is true in like traditional markets as well. It's not like a crypto specific thing. This is just like true in markets in general. That larger market cap assets move less, smaller market caps move more, especially in bull markets or bear markets where there's more volatility for low market cap and less volatility for high market cap assets. Just in general, that's always true.
Yeah. Okay. So let me present to you a scenario. This is the scenario that worries me. When I talk about what you guys have done to friends of mine, they're like, oh, okay. So basically, they translate everything into Rune, which is a chain and a coin they control the minting and burning of. So it's like they just translate everything into this universe where they're God, and then they translate everything out, which is what gives you the control to make the product. So it's not a terrible thing necessarily. Right. But that makes people say, "Oh my God, this is Terra Luna once all over again," right? Like at some point, this fucking thing, it's going to go. I don't know why, but if Rune like starts going towards zero, then the system has to mint more and more Rune to redeem loans, right? And so if the price drops too low, and I haven't calculated what that number is, does the system freeze up, right? Because the Rune's worth like tenth of a penny or something, right?
Right. I think the price of Rune, in order to get to that kind of like disaster scenario thing that you're referring to, I think it would have to be like 30 cents or something like this, which is a lot lower than what it is now. But there's a lot of reasons why like that's, at least in my view, not very likely to happen. The reason why is because one is there is a supply cap of Rune, which is 500 million. And that's always been true even before lending existed. The monetary policy of Rune itself has not been shifted or changed at all. Technically, it was a billion to start like 5 years ago, but it was halved or whatever. Anyways.
And Luna was uncapped.
And Luna was uncapped. That's why there's like, 7 trillion tokens or whatever the hell the quantity is today. It's like, it's uncapped. And so you have this kind of like self-feeding kind of monster going race to the bottom, kind of like bank run scenario. So the first thing is that there's only a cap to the supply. You can't mint, forever. So that kind of limits the downside to some degree at least, right? The second thing is that the process of either getting a derived asset, like the collateral derived, like the cloud that we were talking about before, either Tor or any kind of those derived assets, the fees paying to swap in and out of those things, to go from Rune to Thor BDC or Rune to Tor, or Tor to Rune, or whatever, those are virtual like AMM pools. There's no actual LPs in them. It's just they're computed pools based upon their layer one, counterparts, right? And so the depth of those pools shrinks relative to the volume being traded through the layer one counterparts, right? So what that means is if there is a bank run scenario, just say that tomorrow there's a huge bank run, something happened, I don't know what it was, but let's assume something happens, and everybody starts running for the exit, the virtual pools become really shallow, which means the fees go higher, and higher, right? So you have an ability to exit if you want to, but there's going to be, high fees to do so. And maybe those fees are so high that it actually doesn't make sense anymore to do it. Like you would have to spend $35,000 to get $30,000 worth of your collateral. Like that just wouldn't make any logical sense to do that. You would just stop at some point because you would lose money if you were to close the loan. So if there is a bank run of some scenario, this is there to create the kind of counterbalance of like, hey, if you exit now, you can, but you're going to pay, a lot in fees. Or if you wait until tomorrow or like the next day or whatever the hell it is when the markets kind of chill the fuck out, you can get your full collateral back, right? And so that just creates the incentive to cool off and if you wait later, you'll get a better deal, so to speak, to kind of cool off the engine of this kind of scenario. Whereas in Terra's case, it was just like, well, the longer that I wait, the more I'm going to get fucked, right? So I got to get out now, because if I do tomorrow, like the whole like idea of like backing UST with like $6 billion of Bitcoin, it sounded good in its face, but when you're like in that situation, like, well, there's Bitcoin now. If I exit my UST now, I'll get the Bitcoin, which is great. But if I exit tomorrow, well, the Bitcoin might be gone by then, and then I'm in a worse situation. So it's all about creating like the incentives correctly, a counterbalance to that hypothetical scenario of that. In addition, this whole virtual pool thing that I'm mentioning for it, the other reason why it was created, or I would argue even the primary reason why it was created, is that if somebody wanted to price manipulate, say they wanted to push the Bitcoin price to like $2 million by making some absurd trades on THORChain, that would also cause that pool to become extremely shallow, which means they would probably pay 98% in fees. They would get absolutely wrecked in fees. And so that is there to create a counterbalance to any attempts to create a price manipulation of those pools, because we don't use oracles. I fucking hate oracles. I hate being dependent upon external resources that are, a 5 of 9 multi-sig or some kind of horseshit design. And so everything is kind of like internally grown or internally like operated. There's no external dependencies whatsoever, but you have to be worried about how do people price manipulate this thing to get themselves an even better deal? And this whole virtual system is there to counterbalance that particular price manipulation attack vector.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So I guess the fees rising. I mean, I guess the fact that you guys control the DEX through which this is primarily like everything happens, like that gives you a lot of design freedom that I think a lot of other things haven't had in the past. And clearly you've studied all these things, right? So it's of course top of your mind. Like we can't become the next Luna. Like it takes some balls for you guys to walk out on the stage with this product, right? Knowing what's happened in the past, right? It's like we are aware of the issues and the dangers. And I would also say, going back to your comparison to Luna, where it was backed by Bitcoin, that Bitcoin purchase by Do Kwon, where he gave his enemy, he basically armed his enemy by accepting that Bitcoin deal, where he gave them a bunch of Terra or a bunch of Luna, I think it was, or might have been, I can't remember which it was. It was Terra. I think it was Terra actually. So the dollar denominated one, and he accepted the Bitcoin. But he armed someone, probably Citadel, we don't know for sure, but he armed someone with so much Terra that all they had to do was dump it on the market to just cause the thing to start depegging like crazy, which started the chain reaction, which led to its demise. Now, the potential for that was always there, but it was specifically that act that sealed its doom. And arguably without that act, without one actor acquiring that much of Terra, it might not have been possible to tip it over.
Yeah, I mean, in their case, one of the fundamental flaws of Terra design, in my opinion, is that the primary market of being able to mint and burn UST or Luna, whatever, that was a temporary system that would only function for so much volume per day, and it was like that as a counterbalance to price manipulation. But by doing so, in their particular case, it created an opportunity that, like, if you just sold enough, and they will arb the primary market until it's done for the day. You know what I mean? There's no more ability to use the primary market, which means there's nothing supporting the peg anymore, because UST on Curve or on Ethereum or just other dexes or whatever, they don't have any interest to maintain the peg, right? That's a free floating asset that could go up or down arbitrarily any amount. And the LFG was put together just to like be kind of a big giant bouncer to, like, once the primary market is completed for the day and it can't do any more volume, then the LFG steps in and just uses its big muscles to push the price down or push the price up, depending upon which direction they want to go. And that's not a substantial, a good way to go, which is why we didn't design our system anywhere close to how that's designed. Instead, we could have opted for, like, if you wanted a huge amount of volume, you can have it, but you're just going to get charged a bunch of fees to do so, right? Which is like similar to what Bitcoin does of, like, if you want block space in the Bitcoin blockchain, you can have it, but you might have to pay $100 or $1,000 or whatever, arbitrary large number to get that block space right now if you want that right now. It's kind of leaning on that Bitcoin design to some sense of just using the economics to maintain the system, rather than like a big giant bouncer who has $6 billion in his pocket who doesn't, who can push everybody around. That's just not the way that we kind of think about the problem. And the other thing it's a really important note is that, like, one of the problems of Terra's case was that they had an ability to change the protocol, but it took like 2 weeks to do like a voting process to change anything, right? And so once things started going south, within 2 days, 3 days, whatever it was, game was already set. Thing was already over, right? 2 weeks is way too far advanced. In our particular design, any one of the validators has an ability to temporarily pause the network, and other validators can back that up by also agreeing to pause the network, or go in the other direction and say, we're going to go fight this one malicious validator and go in a resuming kind of like direction. So if something were to happen that all these safety mechanisms that I've been talking about for the last 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, let's just say they all fail for some reason. I don't know, whatever. Let's just say that it happens. We always have the ability as a protocol just to, like, pause things on a dime temporarily, have a discussion with the community and say, here's the situation. This has gone wrong because of X, Y, and Z. Here's our solutions, A, B, C, or D, or E. Like, let's take a vote. What do we want to do? And then the community votes, and then we deploy some software change that fixes whatever the thing is that's apparently broken, whatever that is. I don't know what it is, of course, because we don't know what the situation is. But you have the ability to just like pause things, fix them, and then resume them. And once they're fixed, then there's no reason to panic.
And with those degrees of freedom, could you decide to mint more Rune beyond the 500 million?
Sure. If that's what the community, that is possible if the community votes to do so. And that's the same thing with Bitcoin too. Like you could increase the supply of Bitcoin from 21 million to 42 million, which by the way, that was what Satoshi intended to have 42 million. It was actually an accident that it ended up being 21 million. He had a little bit of a calculation problem when he first launched Bitcoin, but like that could be theoretically changed if the miners all agreed to push it to 42 million. We all know that's not going to happen for a whole host of reasons, but like, in the end, the community has to make the decision, like maybe we'll mint more than 500 million. Maybe we'll, close the loans and not allow the loans to be closed. Like who knows? Like I can't, it's up to the community to decide at that point how they want to handle the situation.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And I think you said this earlier, and there's been some sort of cutting in and out, unfortunately, with our bandwidth here. So I didn't quite catch it. How many validators do you have at this time?
I think it's like 103 or 104, like around that area.
Okay. And they're all over the globe, that, as usual kind of thing?
They're all over the globe. I don't know who they are. We specifically designed and advocated in THORChain's case that the validators do not expose identities, do not expose any information about themselves at all. It's just part of like protection. And if I were to get tapped by some government agency who wants to shut the network down, I don't know who they are. Like, I really don't know, who the validators are, and I don't want to know who the validators are either. And so it's up to them to decide. And they hold, obviously a crap ton of Rune. So they're highly aligned to the protocol, and I think it survive and flourish and do well. And so their incentives are correct in that regard.
Okay, so who decides how much is available to be lent out at any given time? So if I said it was like 150 million. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's directionally correct. Let's say who can push it up to 300 million?
It's always the validators, right? So any change to the protocol ultimately comes down to the validators to determine if they want that change or not. 100%.
So the validators approved this lending product.
Correct.
They were like, "Yep, we like this idea. We think this will push up the value of Rune. We support it." Okay, and so the number of 150 million was chosen by them also.
No, that was proposed by like the devs of like, here's our proposal. We want to scale up lending from a 5 million Rune cap to a 25 million Rune cap, which is approximately $250 million in collateral value. Okay. And we propose it to the community through what's called an ADR, or like a BIP or a tip, depending upon which blockchain you're talking about. And the community just votes. The validators vote with their nodes, and whatever the 2/3 majority vote, that's the result, right? So when we hit the cap, which I'm sure we're going to do hopefully in the next month, maybe 2 months, 3 months, who knows. But once that cap is hit, then the community is going to be kind of posed with a question. Do we want to increase the caps? Do we want to just not increase the caps and sit on our hands and just see how lending works out on a longer time frame before we dive deeper into that pool, in a matter of speaking, right? That's going to be a discussion and a debate within the community, but in the end, it's the validators who make the determination.
Yeah. So So basically, if there were 250 million worth of collateral, that would suggest a 500 million loan cap. Correct.
So the collateral value would be 250 million, and then the debt value would be approximately half of that. Oh,
it's the other way. Right. I'm an idiot. It's the other way around.
Yeah.
Okay. So right now, I thought we were at the debt was at about 100, and it could be 150 million total debt.
No, it could be total, but around, because the Rune price is around $10 or whatever the hell it is right now. So it's about 10 times 25, a million, blah, 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 comes up to 250 million.
Okay. So the plan is when this thing is at scale, like how big can it get? Can it get 6 times bigger what it is right now? I mean,
that's the caps are. I mean, that's an unknown thing. That's for the community to determine. So realistically speaking, if you wanted to, you could just remove the caps. If you were so inclined and you were just so bullish on this feature and you were so confident of its success or whatever, you could just go ahead and remove the caps. And there's arguments of why you wouldn't want to do that, and there's arguments of why you would want to do that. It's just like it's a subjective opinion. Like, one of the risks of just removing the caps is that you would create a lot of what we refer to internally as like being top heavy, meaning that there's only so much Rune in the pools. Let's just say there's like 50 million Rune in the pools total, and we've burnt, let's just call it 300 million Rune, right? So if all of that comes, charging back into the space, the amount that affects on the price is quite significant because of that 50 million liquidity that's in the pools right there. So there's a relationship between the depth of the pools and like how much the price can be pushed in a kind of a bank run scenario, which we were kind of briefly talking about earlier. And so that's the kind of the idea is like, do you want to be relative to the pool, like 1-to-1 or like a 2-to-1, like twice the pool size, or just YOLO it and say no caps at all? People can burn Rune supply from 500 million down to 10 million if they really wanted to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So tell me a little bit now about yourself and how you got involved with Rune. Let's just talk about you. I mean, you are a Chad. We know that. So, where do you come from, and how did you get involved with this? I'm
a card-carrying Chad here. Yes, I was living in. This is kind of a funny story too. I was living in Germany, and I was without a job, and a friend of mine was doing a startup competition in Leipzig, Germany, and he asked me, like, "Hey, I need a dev to help me build this company," and this is like a Web 2 Silicon Valley type thing. And I kind of wanted to go to Germany anyway. So it's just like, yeah, I'll come meet you. I'll just give me a couch to sleep on or something, and I'll build it for free for you. Right. And during that, the US government went to my bank account and stole everything I had, literally put up my bank account into a negative balance. Shit you not. True story. And then I was like, oh fuck. Now I'm just like, I have no job and I'm completely fucking broke, other than like the Bitcoin that I had and Ether and that kind of stuff. But like, I was just completely fucking broke, right? And so then I started looking for a job to be like a CTO of some blockchain thing, whatever. And I found one that was called Sky Network. And Sky Network was trying to do like air traffic control on the blockchain. And they're still around today. And I was going to meet the CEO and one of the advisors to do this, thing. We were going to meet up at a Cosmos hackathon in Berlin, which was coincidentally just the following week. And like, why don't you just come to Berlin? We'll hang out. Like, we'll spend a couple of days together. Like, this will be your job interview, right? We'll just do a little hacking. We'll chat. We'll have dinner, whatever. And so we got together, and then me and the advisor started to kind of like work on something. And he's like, what are we going to do? He's like, well, I had this idea last year of this like cross-chain swapping idea. Like, why don't we start just, for the hell of it,
knocking it around. Yeah.
Let's knock it around a little bit. So I had read the Cosmos hackathon. I didn't even know what Cosmos was at the time that I showed up to this thing. Like I heard about it from them, and then I read the documentation the previous day of the Cosmos hackathon, which the documentation was not that great at that particular time. There was a lot to be desired at that particular time. But I showed up. We started coding this thing that would be the first lines of code for THORChain, and we ended up winning that particular hackathon, and then launched the token I think a week later. And then at that point, I was working for THORChain. I was working for Sky Network, but neither one had money to pay me quite yet. So I actually took a third job working for Binance, building the Binance, what we can now call the Beacon chain. I was building out like escrow and hedge escrow and multi-sig functionality and like submitting it to them to help there. So I was building 3 different blockchains simultaneously, which was kind of a funny notion. And then obviously I eventually left Sky Network, and I was like only a short-term contractor for Binance, but I needed money. So I was like, I need fucking money because I'm dead goddamn broke. And so I eventually got, full-time on the THORChain side and built what we have now, more or less. Yeah,
no, I'm super fascinating. So you've been deep in the chains for a long time, and multiple chains. So
yeah,
very, very interesting. So I had another question too, actually, about sort of my experience using the product. As I mentioned earlier, I use the Shapeshift wallet for my sort of initial experiments, and I put some native Bitcoin into the system, and I got some. I'm pretty sure it was USDC out on the Ethereum chain. I'm pretty sure. And then I did the same. Then I did the same thing with one of my old Ledger wallets. Like I got a Beater Ledger that I use for experiments, so I used it for this, and it basically wouldn't let me borrow anything other than Bitcoin. So I could put Bitcoin as collateral, but it wouldn't return anything other than Bitcoin. Maybe that's an artifact of the Shapeshift user interface, because I would have thought it would have been like, hey, connect an Ethereum wallet, and that's where we'll give you your stuff, your loan.
I wonder if it's because when you were using Trust Wallet, you were connecting specifically like that chain, and so they didn't know where to send the.
Yeah, I think that's what was going on. Okay, so that's not like
from a protocol perspective, that's not a limitation. That might be something about a particular UI. THORChain itself does not actually have a UI, its own UI. Like there's no official UI of THORChain. There's about 20 different UIs in total that utilize THORChain for one reason or another. I think there's like 3 or 4 UIs that do the whole lending concept. But yeah, each UI has their own implementation, their own team, their own engineers, their own roadmaps, all that stuff. And so they can implement it however they see fit.
Got it. Okay. Well, Chad, where can people find you online? Like, where's your Twitter and whatever you want to plug? Go ahead.
Well, I generally don't plug myself that much, but if you want to follow me, I'm at C Barraford, CBARRAFORD. Maybe we'll put a link in the show notes. But even better than that, you should just go ahead and follow the THORChain account. It's even better than me, at THORChain. And then there's a huge community of people in the industry that's really fun to follow. So don't just follow me, follow a lot of other people that actually supply more valuable information than I do.
Well, Chad, this has been an absolutely fascinating discussion. So thank you once again for making the time. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This has been Hash Rate. We'll see you all next time.